Did you have a good New Year?
I did. Well, very, it's funny. I mean, my husband and I were both asleep before midnight. I had all these texts from my brothers. I have a brother in Edmonton and one in Vancouver.
Mhm.
And I guess at midnight, my time, he sent me this Happy New Year on the East Coast. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't get it till like 9 the next morning. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So no, very quiet. We had a really nice Christmas with my kids. My
Nice.
daughter stayed with us for like 6 days, which was nice. And they live in Brooklyn and
Sure.
Queens, but before they come over, they always get tested, and it's like as though they've traveled, to another country, and so they always stay a few nights, and so that was really nice. So yeah, they had just sort of left actually. So my husband and I were like, no, it wasn't that bad, but we weren't motivated to stay up really late, put it that way.
The novelty kind of wears off after a while too. My
Yeah.
wife was kind of like that too. She's like, "Yep, it's gonna hit midnight, and I'm going to sleep."
Oh yeah, I can't. Yeah, and
Yeah,
we recorded Times Square on NBC, which was
sure.
whatever it was. It wasn't. Although we always watch that every year, and
Mhm.
they have some interesting musical guests, I guess. But even that was sort of like, nah, this is an alternate reality right now. It just is.
It is very surreal, which uh,
Hmm.
is why I'm glad you agreed
Uh-oh.
to join.
What
Uh,
a
to talk
segue!
about, you like the segue? Yeah,
Yes, very smooth.
thank you.
Very smooth.
Talk about the Apple from
Hmm.
1980.
Hmm.
Yeah, I watched it twice yesterday. It's been
Oh, I'm
ages.
sorry.
I, you know,
Impressed.
well, thank you. Well, I watched it the first time, and then I contacted my friend. I'm like, "Oh, you gotta watch it. Have you seen this?" And she's like, "No, I haven't watched it yet." I'm like, "You've got to watch it." So we did a watch party, and her and I sat and we watched the Apple, and just I found I enjoyed the film quite a bit. I recognize it for the time period in that, but
Sure.
you know uh, I found it very interesting, and she did too. How some of the things in the Apple could actually still apply today. I mean, it takes place in 1994, and uh,
Way into the future.
way
Way into the future.
way into the future. And if you would mind telling my listeners and that just a little bit about your character and about the Apple.
Okay, yes. Well, epic motion picture, I have to say. So yeah, you're right about the timing. I mean, it was the late 70s, and there were a lot of these rock musical um, feature films being made. And Menachem Golan, who was the director producer, he really wanted to break into the American film market, and this was going to be his vehicle. So he got a couple of I guess Kobe Recht and his wife wrote the script, the original
Mhm.
script, and he wrote the music alongside somebody named George Clinton, not the George Dreadlock Clinton guy,
Right.
but another one. And I was in, at that time, it was 1978, I guess, or nine. I was in London, England, studying dance. I was training as a dancer. I graduated from high school with Edmonton. And I was over there training. And before I left from Edmonton, my sort of mentor said, when you're gone, just audition for everything you can. Just audition for everything. So one day I was going to class, take a dance class, and a couple of my classmates were heading the opposite direction. I said, "Where are you going?" And they're going, "We're going to this audition. We heard about this audition for this film, this movie that needs dancers." So I was like, Jill McDonald was her name, and her voice was sort of ringing in my brain. So I followed just spontaneously. I had no preparation whatsoever. Went and did this massive cattle call dance audition, and during it, I noticed the director and producers sitting at the front of the room, and they were sort of, framing fingers, and it looked like they were kind of looking at me, and I was like, you know, what the hell, as I'm dancing away. And as it turned out, it was the director. He pulled me out and he called me to the front. He said, "Do you act?" And I said, "Yeah, I acted. Sure, I acted. You know, I was in the theater club at high school and stuff." So he had me audition for the role of Beebe in The Apple. I didn't have a clue of what I was doing. They said, "Do you sing?" I said, "Yes, I sing too." And so they gave me some sides. I had never done anything like this before. And then they taught me a song and had me sing. And I guess there was one other girl that was one of the dancers as well that they were considering, but they thought I was great and I got the job. So I ended up in this movie. I guess I'm trying to think if I had even read the script all the way through, but I was like, you know, I was young and I thought, this is a great opportunity. I mean, why not?
Right.
Why wouldn't I do this thing? So yeah, I ended up with this role, and it was this futuristic rock musical. Sort of, it's loosely sort of based on an Adam and Eve kind of a theme. My partner and I, Beebe and oh my God, Andy and Daddy, Beebe and Alfie.
Alfie.
I almost forgot his name. Oh my God, it's been a while. So it's set in 1994, which at that time seemed like way in the distance. And the world basically is run by this, you know, music guy, huge music guy who sort of controls even how people react to everything. You know, they react to specific kinds of music in a certain way, and everything's kind of monitored. And there's this you have to do these exercises every day, and it's just this really sort of evil character. Mr. Boogaloo is his name. And then so Alfie and I come on the scene. We're these struggling musicians from Moose Jaw, which is the name I came up with. First in the script they had like Toronto, and I'm like, Toronto, that's a giant city. And it was supposed to be from the sticks, you know, the Boondocks or something. And I had a friend from Moose Jaw, and I thought, that's the best name ever. So that was my little gift to the project. We were these, you know, young kids from Moose Jaw, and we got on stage in this big music competition that was already kind of Pandy and Dandy, which were the famous people at the time. They were going to win no matter what, because that's the way Mr. Boogaloo wanted it. But we came on and started singing this little love song. They're very heavy duty rock and roll, Pandy and Dandy. We came on singing this little love song, and all of a sudden the crowd kind of reacts to it in an unexpected way, which is a huge threat to Mr. Boogaloo's empire. So what he decides to do is to hire us as musicians so that he can kind of nip it in the bud and create us as stars in the way he wants us to be. So come to signing the big contracts, I'm all excited, but Alfie, my boyfriend, hesitates and he doesn't sign the contract. So the symbolism is, I, as Beebe, I'm sort of you know, Eve character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking, and they even have this, you know, fantasy scene where there's a giant apple and I take a bite. So I'm Eve biting the apple, you know. I buy into the whole thing, and it goes from there. I become a big star, but of course I'm, you know, my boyfriend finds me again, and I realize, no, I really want to live with him, not this crazy life that I've gotten myself into.
It'd been so long since I watched it. I watched it when I was younger and I didn't get it. And I watched it now and I got it. And
can you explain it to me?
Well, some of it. I got some of it. You know, the symbolism, you're right, you know, is prevalent throughout the whole. I mean, the thing's called the apple, and
there you go.
You know, and Yeah, that the scene you talk about, the fantasy scene, because Alfie goes into these uh, uh, visions, which isn't always clear that it's actually a vision or not.
Very
You know,
tricky.
but I think what took me aback, because I had heard stories and I'd seen the ratings and that, but it's kind of garnered, especially over the last 10 years, this cult following, almost a Rocky Horror Picture Show like. Um, so that's why I wanted to revisit it as well. And
Mm.
it's it's got it's got charm though. You know, for all of its bumps, I found some charm to it. And as my friend who watched it said, it was whimsical. It it
Yeah,
it
yeah.
it, it feels like a whimsical type of musical, and
Hmm.
it feels like it's almost there, like it could reach Rocky Horror Picture Show type of following, because it's in that vein. It has that spirit for
Right.
sure. Um, and I'm glad you brought up the fantasy sequence, because it really opened up how the big scope was for this film. Now, I mean, here you are. This is like your first major role, and you're lead actress on this. The scope was a huge production. Did that surprise you at all? What was that like to be part of that?
Well, frankly, I had nothing to compare it to. So
Hmm.
I was just literally going along day to day, doing what they told me to do. I really had no concept of what making a movie was or wasn't. And it was a pretty big budget actually at the time. It was like $5 million. And uh, but I really was, I was very BB like in a way, I was very young. I was very naive. I was just fortunately it was legit, it was a
Yeah.
legit movie and a legit production company. I got an agent out of it and things like that. And they sort of looked out for me and stuff. Um, but truly, I wasn't surprised or not surprised by anything, because I jumped into this thing. I was literally living at the YWCA in Camden Town, or Mornington Crescent, I guess it was. And I had no money. That's where I was living when I was taking my dance class. So
Sure.
what I would do at the YWCA, they provided you with breakfast and I guess dinner, but
Hmm.
you weren't provided lunch. So what I would do is this during rehearsal, I would make myself like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and take it to rehearsal, because we rehearsed quite a bit. There was, the dance numbers, for instance.
Yes.
Um, and we did a lot of rehearsing. So I would just have my little sandwich that I made it at breakfast. I was the lead in this feature film, and all the dancers were off getting lunch at the pub or whatever, and I'm just eating my little sandwich that I'd made. And then we flew off to Berlin, to Germany, and we shot the bulk of the movie in West Berlin. This was when the wall was still up.
Sure.
So by that time, I was fairly friendly with a lot of the dancers. So I felt pretty comfortable, and we were put up in a hotel, and I mean, literally, I was just like, okay, tell me what to do, I'll do it. And I loved every second of it as well.
Hmm.
The one thing about it though is, because I had no money, and on a set, you're provided food. Like, this food is there all the time. I ate so much food, like constantly, because I've just had this feeling like, I can't afford to buy any, so I better just eat it all now. And I think I must have gained a bunch of weight actually.
Oh.
And Menachem literally came up to me and said, "You got to stop gaining weight." And I was always super skinny. Actually, I remember gaining weight and thinking, I liked it because I'd always been so skinny. But then, of course, it doesn't look as good on camera and all that
Well,
other junk.
co-
Yeah, it
continuity or whatever, you know.
right. So it was really truly a fascinating time, and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I just like I said, I went with the flow. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
I literally knew nothing.
Sure.
But as a dancer and having a background as a dancer, it's very, very disciplined. And
Mhm.
And so I also wasn't lazy. You know, I was paying
Right.
attention every moment and doing the best job that I knew how to do. And I think that comes with the discipline of dance.
The dance numbers was again one of the many things that surprised me with this film because you
Hmm.
know just because of the reputation it kind of had and I mean we're not talking like two or three people. You have a very large cast of talented dancers
Hmm.
along with
Hmm.
you performing rather elaborate routines, including, and I have to ask because I saw it and I literally went, how many times did you have to fall backwards on that fantasy scene?
Well, you know, that was one of the things we rehearsed quite a bit in London before I went out
Sure.
there. So I pretty much trusted
Uh,
the dancers who were catching me. Yeah, probably a number of times. I'm sure. I don't remember
sure.
exactly, but you know, normally there's a uh, in something like that too. It was kind of a complicated shot, so I'm sure it was 5 or 10 times. Yeah.
But I
I
watched
loved it. I loved it. It was so much fun for me.
it seemed like you were definitely having fun in the dance sequences, especially with and I will admit I got a little worried when we first see you in that scene. You and Alfie are in Adam and Eve garb, and he goes, "Leaves won't do here," and he snaps his finger, and I'm like, oh no, and then they were like,
Ew.
then you're in a full, you know, the gown, and I'm like, ah,
Gown.
okay, that's the direction I was I
Whew.
was it was a direction I was kind of hoping they'd go to. I'm like, oh, don't become, you know, don't this film's very whimsical. Don't do that.
Right, right, right. Well, here's the thing about this is one of the reasons it works and one of the reasons it doesn't work
Hmm.
is there is so much the, Menachem and Yoram Globus, the producer, were very, very serious about this movie. To them, this wasn't whimsical. This was going to break into the movie industry.
Sure.
Rocky Horror Picture Show was approached in a very whimsical way. There's
Hmm.
no question. This kind of looks like it is approached that way, but it's not. There's so much sincerity behind it. They were taking it very seriously. And that's one of the reasons I feel like it works is because that comes out in it, that
Hmm.
everybody was, you know, that we weren't trying to be funny.
Right.
But one of the reasons it didn't work was because we weren't trying to make it whimsical. And I always say that, you know, Menachem was a big producer director in Israel. And I feel like there was just his kind of approach to things and his understanding of, you know, the American film market was just off, just slightly. That it just never. It was like, what is this? Perhaps if it was done in Israel, it would have been a massive hit. You know what I mean? Um, but I think what what uh, gives it the endurance that it has is that you just can't take it seriously. And literally, they do Rocky Horror Picture Show kind of screenings
Hmm.
where the audience will come dressed in costume and they'll repeat the words back to the or at the same
Sure.
time as on the screen and all that stuff. I've witnessed it. It's just the first time I realized it was of this,
Hmm.
you know, cult sort of level was years ago, probably 15 or 20 years ago. I got this phone call from, I don't know if it was Entertainment Magazine or something like that. And they said, do you realize that The Apple is like this cult film? And I was like, The Apple? What? I hadn't heard about The Apple. I knew when it was first released that,
Hmm.
you know, it
Yeah.
wasn't the huge success that Menachem hoped it would be. But and so it's kind of like just disappeared, fizzled away, although it did establish my acting career. Um, and they said, yeah, you know, it plays these in these small theaters all over the country, like at midnight, and it attracts this huge audience. And so there was going to be a screening, like, I don't know, I found out about a screening in New York in a small theater here. And so my husband and I decided to go, and we sat in the back. And at that time, my hair was really short, so
Mm-hmm.
and nobody would have recognized me, put it that way. And watched this thing, and I was just like, "Wow, how did that happen?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was a yeah. So and it just has kind of perpetuated itself, you know. I mean, I've gone to many screenings since then.
Mm-hmm.
Lincoln Center in New York has screened it several times. Um, they did a whole thing on Canon films,
Mm-hmm.
and Menachem and Yoram were there. This is not too long before he passed away, actually. And I was at the screening, and I was up. We did a Q&A on stage. I hadn't seen him for decades. You know, it was so great to see him again. Um, so it's you know, it's harmless ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
It's and it definitely is whimsical. But was what was funny about it was that it was meant to be this serious, you know, not
Sure.
serious, but this rock musical that was going to, you know, blow everyone in America away.
But I think that's what helps with some cult films, though, is the fact that the filmmakers going into it are genuine. They're believing this is like some serious cinema that's just going to be, and then it doesn't hit and it kind of fades, but then it has, I think that sincerity adds to the charm and the longevity, in all honesty, than
Right.
someone who specifically goes out to make a cult classic. Like,
Oh yeah, it's impossible. You can't make a cult classic. You just can't, because I mean, it, it wouldn't be a cult classic if it was
right.
trying to be a cult classic. It's always those kind of like weird backwards movies that,
Mhm.
yeah, like you say, they sort of disappear from the scene and then come back in this other sort of this alternate universe.
Yeah, and part of the reason too we're doing the Apple is one, I wanted to do it and
Mhm.
talk about it, but it's starting our series of what we're calling Canon fodder. Each month we're looking at a different Canon film
Right.
because
Nice.
it's one of those things where it doesn't come up in regular conversation, but the minute you mention a Canon film, suddenly everybody chimes in on their favorite Canon film, Canon group. It's like,
They were very prolific. They there's oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name of
mm,
the documentary that was done where they interviewed
oh,
so many different.
I have it, Electric Boogaloo. It's way in
Yes,
the
Electric
back.
Boogaloo.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, that's a fascinating. It's
Hmm.
fascinating to watch that, and their whole sort of business, you know,
Hmm.
idea is like just plow up movies as fast as you can, get a huge star, Arnold Schwarzenegger or something, do a sequel, pay him a ton of money, shoot it as cheaply as possible. So many times they would just have the cast and everything and not even a script yet, but it was going to
Right.
be, I don't know, something rather too, you know,
Right.
some really hugely successful movie and make it a sequel. Um, and that was their formula, and they made a ton of money. I mean, they would go to like Cannes and just sell these movies without having any script. So they were very prolific. They just made movie after movie after movie after movie. Yeah. So there's very few people that were around in the 80s and
Mhm.
early 90s that probably didn't see a Canon film at some point.
Well, especially with the direct to video market as well, that it
Sure.
had a boom there. Which is funny you mentioned that, because I read, yeah, I mean, my wife got it for me for Christmas, for a birthday present, the Canon film guide.
Yes, I have that too. I haven't really looked at it very closely yet, but I have it. Yeah.
It's an amazing book. I mean, most of it you could just use it as like a reference guide. Think of a movie and look it up. It doesn't read like a story, but
Right.
I found it fascinating, some of the movies in there. But like you said, their approach made me think. When I was watching the Apple, you have I think it's Pandy says the line, or no, it wasn't Pandy, it was Mr. Shakes says the line about marketing. First, first you sell it, then you make it. That's marketing. And
That's exactly, so yeah, that was, they took from their own playbook there. That's so funny that you say that, because that is actually what they did. Excuse me,
that,
my baby's
uh,
name.
and that's why I laughed, because I was like, wow, they're like, that's very meta right there.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. Um,
It's true.
Now in the book you mentioned that your favorite scene was the first scene you shot, which was looking for Alfie. I was wondering what your favorite dance routine was, because you have a number of them in here, and I was wondering which one did you enjoy doing the most?
Well, let's see, enjoy doing the most. I mean, the one that I remember the
Sure.
most was the one from Speed.
Mm,
That one was that I remember that because we shot that over a few days, and
hmm.
I was wearing these boots that came up to my thighs. But the thing about it was the heels were super high.
Ooh,
They were like 5-inch heels, and I had to do this really sort of energetic,
sure.
dance number while I'm screaming the song out. And I lost all sensation in my toes because there
Oh
was so
no,
much pressure on my feet. And I didn't get sensation back in my toes for like a decade,
really? Wow.
truly. Yeah. So that was one of my big memories
Oh.
of dancing in the Apple. I
Mhm,
didn't have that much dancing. I mean,
mhm,
there were lots of dancers and stuff, but that was really, I feel like that was my big dance
sure.
number.
Well, that's the one that they feature on the cover of the album, which I have.
Speed. That's right. Yeah. I was
The
hardcore, man.
yeah. Well, and it's funny. I'm listening to the lyrics, and we're listening to it, watching it, and I'm like, okay, are they is this an anti-American song, or is this a sympathetic song about America? 'Cause it's a
Yeah,
Canadian production, so I was like, are they trying to make a statement about the US? Uh,
it's a Canadian product. What do
well,
you mean it's a
it
Canadian
was
production?
listed. It was listed as a. I read somewhere it had listed that it was a Canadian production, but I mean
Oh,
it's Golan and Globulas, but
Golan
Golan.
Globus.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Ah, I'm horrible
yeah.
with names. I apologize, but no, it was just considering.
Catherine Mary Stewart.
Yes, I
Just
got
making
that
sure.
one. I got that one. um, but they produced it, and so I was just wondering if they were making a commentary on on the U.S. culture with that song. It
Oh
was,
well, I mean, they were making a comment on drugs, and
yeah.
yeah, for sure. What's also so funny for me, because I was so young and naive,
Mm.
I when I first heard the song, I was thinking they're talking about moving really fast from New York out to LA, and they're
Yes,
going so fast. And I wasn't thinking in terms of speed, the drug at all.
right.
Same with, oh, this is so embarrassing, but of course the famous one, Coming,
Yes.
where I guess, my first reaction to it was, oh, he's coming to her. Isn't that nice? Coming for me. Yay, come for me. And then I saw the choreography and everything. I'm like,
Oh.
oh, never mind. I remember, I think my I don't know, somehow my parents saw like the lyrics or something, and they were so great. They were very cool about everything. But I remember the reaction going, oh, looking at that, I'm going, isn't it neat? Isn't it cool? I was Vivi. I still am in
Sure.
many, many ways. It's very sad.
Well, what I found interesting with this film too is how it kind of takes this right turn, and this is where
Mhm.
we saw a little bit of a parallel of like where it applies today, where it's starting off with BB and Alfie, and they're getting their record contract, and BB's becoming big, and kind of that telltale story, and then like an hour into it, suddenly we're into this dystopian future where cops are arresting people for not wearing the BIM mark, and all of the country stops for a fitness in the US.
Well, Mr. Buglow he was crazy with power at that point. Remember when they introduced the BIM mark, right?
Right.
He was
Yep.
he was like, how can we market our music even even better. And I forget what the character's name was, but he came up with this BIM mark. Everybody should wear a BIM mark. And he thought that was the greatest thing in the world. And he had enough power to make it law, so that you had to, like, you know, on some level, you were like, you know, doing what Boogaloo wanted you to do. He had control over you by just even symbolically by wearing a BIM mark. And then, you know, doing that every day at a certain time, everything stops, including, you know, surgery, and and everybody has to do the BIM or this exercise to keep them healthy. It's very dystopian, and you know, and in many ways, some places are similar to that, and some places are trying to be like that. Not mentioning any places,
No.
but yeah, I mean, it's frightening, but and it is kind of silly, but you know, it sort of reminds you of the not so distant past, where
Right.
there are leaders in parts of the world that would love to be in that position,
Mm-hmm.
and have that kind of control over everybody. And I guess that was the whole point of it.
What I love too
No, he
is,
was also the devil, right?
yeah, well, he was the
Yeah,
devil. I mean, if no one got
after
that
all,
with the visions from Alfie and, you know, Mr. Shakes looking like the snake, who he was great.
wasn't he? He's so
Oh,
good. Rachel, yeah.
yeah.
He's
Yeah,
back in the United States. He was living in London as an actor for
mhm.
years and years and years. And I don't know how I came across him on Facebook or something, but I came across him and sent him a message. And he's like, "Yeah, I forget where he said he's living, but we were gonna be in touch." And then I don't know, everything, you know, the holidays happened or something. But I'll have to. When I realized that we were doing the Apple, I was like, "Oh, I gotta get in touch with Ray."
He was fantastic in the
Yeah,
film too. I mean, he just, you know, went for it all. And
he sure
uh
did.
you know, and that's what I like, is you have a mixture of new, you know, new actors like yourself with veteran actors. I mean, you know, and it seemed to work as far as the chemistry between everybody. Were the
It
veteran
was
actors
incredible.
kind of helpful with some of the young
Um,
actors at all,
I
or?
mean, it was really remarkable watching them work.
Hmm.
You know, being just absolutely green going onto the set, and watching somebody like Joss Ackland, who's a classically trained English actor, you know, who's been around forever, um, do his thing. And he plays two different characters, and there's
Right.
like the subtle change that he has in his, not only physically, but you know, in his character as well.
Mhm.
And Vladek Shevel, who the same, he's just, oh, he was such a wonderful character actor. He was perfect for the role. And I think he loved playing Boogaloo. And you know, when you see him sort of change into the devil kind of a
Yeah.
thing, he had a lot to do with that look.
Hmm.
He didn't want two horns. He wanted just one horn, and all the sparkle and all the makeup and stuff. He was quite a character. So I think one of the reasons he did the movie was because he thought, what a great, you know,
Yeah.
character to wrap my hands around and really, you know, dig into.
And he does. He's just fun to watch, especially the scene with the 2000 ballet troupe where they're singing about 1994 in business. He just is like, you can tell he's having fun.
He's having a gas, and then that whole image of him on his back, and they're
Yeah.
carrying him through the lens. Not a lot of subtlety there.
That's what is
There's not a
interesting
lot
is
of subtlety in this movie in general, I have to say.
there's parts where it's subtle, and then it's just hitting you with a hammer, like, this is what we're going for right here.
Yeah, yeah. Oh boy.
and
But yeah,
and a
but
lot of glitter, a lot of glitter.
glitter. Well, you know, that was what we looked like in 1994. Or that's what they thought we would look like. And you know, they started out, one of the earlier scenes, like as you mentioned, the first scene was where I'm under the bridge and I'm looking for Alfie, and Mr. Tops comes out and said, or whatever, and he takes me down underground to these hippies. Oh, there's so much to unpack here. For those of you who haven't seen this movie, I mean, we could be here all night, but you're just gonna have to watch it. We also did, one of the earlier scenes that we did was when the cops kind of round us up,
Right.
you know, and in the park, and Mr. Tops comes down and all that other junk, or goes up, or whatever he does.
Yeah.
But okay, what was my point to that? Was that, oh shoot, I forgot what I was gonna say. It had something to do with the shooting early. Oh, the makeup. The makeup. If you'll notice in that scene, like all the lead characters have this insanely, not the hippies, but the insanely crazy hair that was blue and sort of looked like tidal waves, and just crazy makeup and everything like that. So that was early on. They realized that all that makeup was going to take way too long. It took forever to do all that makeup. So you'll notice if you watch the movie, that's the end of the movie, thank goodness, because it's the craziest hair and makeup at that point. But what they ended up doing was, no, we can't do all that every day. It would just be like, it would be too expensive, it would take too long, and all that stuff. So you'll notice in the movie, there's like scenes where they just have like sprayed triangles or something on their hair. They really had to figure all that out as they went along too. Yeah.
Yeah, you had very long hair in the film.
Yes.
was that all your hair?
That was my hair. Yeah, no, I had very, very long hair for a long time. You know, I just, again, as I was a dancer, and I just tied it up in a bun or whatever all the time. And but that was my hair. Yep. And people don't have hair like that anymore. It's all extensions. But no, that was mine.
It was just impressive hair. By again, my friend, she commented, she's like, I wasn't expecting such long hair.
It was also the day, you know, in the 70s and whatnot. You had long straight hair, basically.
And I love how it's 1994 and you have refugees from the 60s, hippies, still around too. That surprised me. And I will say, the very end, it was one of those where I was looking at it going, okay, she was with the hippies for a year, but the kid looks a little bit old.
Yeah, people have commented on that. That was a pretty quick procreation / development of a baby. I show up in this cave under a bridge, and I reunite with Alfie, and in a year I have a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
That was actually Kobe Richter's son.
Oh,
and his
really?
wife at the time. Yeah. And I did get a little bit of direction with that, because again, I was young, and apparently when these cops sort of surround us and are threatening to arrest us and everything, apparently I was just kind of like holding the kid on my hip or something like that. And they're like, you know, you would be much more protective. You would be like, oh my gosh, it wouldn't be about me, it would be about the kid.
Right.
Like, oh, got it. All right. I have no experience in this area. So.
But yeah, I found it quite humorous, that I was like, okay, and especially him, which I guess you could call it now, Alfie had a COVID beard going on. I mean, just that full.
Yeah, it looked really natural, didn't it?
It did. It looked real. I'm like, how long did they wait before shooting this NC?
Oh, yeah, that was not his hair.
So yeah, I mean, your singing on here is great. I really enjoy the musical numbers and the lyrics. You mentioned George Clinton, who became a composer later on, and I really liked those numbers. Was there a song that you liked in particular when you sang it that really struck you?
Well, to be perfectly honest, that's not my singing voice. Did you know that?
Oh, really?
I know I'm giving away a little gem here. I could
Oh,
go on
great.
and lie
The
about it,
veil
but
the
that's,
veil has been pulled away
yeah.
now.
But you know what? Most people that know anything about this movie know that that wasn't me. There's a story behind that as well. So I was going to this. I was training as a dancer, but it was also a general theater school. So I was taking singing and dance and acting and all these other things before I got the movie. Um, so I did sing for them for an audition, and then they thought, well, all like George Gilmore and Alan Love and what's her name? I have Grace Kennedy. They were all professional singers.
Right.
They were professional singers, and I was not and am not. So they hired a singing coach for me to see if they could get me up to the level of these other people. And the long and short of it is they felt like they needed to bring in somebody, and I would
Lip
overdub,
sync, right? Yeah.
lip sync, right?
Mhm.
But I felt like the voice was great for me.
Mhm.
Her name was Mary Hyland. I don't know where she is now. She was lovely. She's had an incredible voice. She was like a studio musician. A really fantastic voice. And I'm glad ultimately that they used her. I was disappointed, obviously, because
Yeah.
I thought I could do it, but they really needed to bump it up for
Mhm.
this singing. Um, um, I think one of my, by the time we shot this movie, because it was the first one I'd ever done, I'd never read a script before, and I love singing in general. I mean, I grew up in a household where you just sing at the top of our lungs all the time. And so I love singing, and I learned these songs. I had them down. I had the
Mhm.
script down. I knew everybody else's words. I knew the songs, and they recorded Mary before we shot, so they would play her, and I would sync to her
Mhm.
song. And I think I did a pretty good job, frankly.
I
Um,
I thought, I mean, it was believable to me, and the voice did match. It normally when
right.
they do that, you can usually tell, like, oh wait, but it matched your voice very well.
Right,
So,
I think so too. So all of the songs, I just love doing them,
mhm.
and I had a really good sense of timing, and I think it came across really well. I think "Cry for Me" is like one of my favorites because it's so romantic. And then it switches to Alfie, and he's singing the song too, and we're both looking through the rain, and I love all that stuff.
It was it's an emotional moment, but it also it clicked in our heads while we're watching. I'm like, this is like Rocky Horror Picture Show meets Grease. Because a lot of the moments in the story was kind of like Grease, in
Yeah.
the songs were at least
Yeah,
you know
for sure. They were
very.
definitely of that era, those songs. I thought they were fantastic myself. I loved them. I thought they were, I mean, the people who wrote these songs, who wrote the score, were, again, George Clinton is a composer, and Kobe Recht he was a huge rock and
Mhm.
roll guy in Israel. So they were no slouches, these people. They knew
Right.
what they were doing. So yeah, I loved the music. I thought it was really good, especially for the day.
Yeah, it's a great musical, very entertaining. I listened to the album a couple times, too, and, yeah, the songs hold up, I think. I mean, it's
Mhm.
again, I think it's that genuine that everybody's out to make a actual musical, so it
Yeah,
comes across a lot more genuine than, say, someone who, "Oh, this is gonna be kind of goofy, so we're gonna play it up." These songs have weight to them,
sure they do. I agree with you 100%. These are
especially
good songs.
when Pandy sings her song where the light, I think it is, where you and
Hmm.
her sing, and when you're looking for Alfie, that song about
Hmm. Hmm.
seeing the light. That was like wow, I'm like watching this, and all of a sudden this song comes on, and you're both just selling it, and it's just like, wow, that's actually a very moving song.
It's very moving. That was intense for Pandy. She
Hmm.
so Menachem really wanted her to cry, and
Mm.
she was having a lot of trouble doing that. I think he just beat her up until she actually was literally crying. I was crying too, but it was faker, I think.
Yeah.
I think they were giving me some tears and things like that. But she was like sobbing. Yeah, it was a beautiful song. I mean,
Yeah.
and that voice of hers too,
Hmm.
beautiful. She went on to do in England. I don't know where she is now, but she was quite well known in England, and ended up with her own talk show and stuff like that, a variety show. Yeah, so these were established musicians.
Hmm. All in this a bit of a quirky musical that I think I'm happy to see films like this grow an audience, a genuine audience over the years,
Hmm.
because I think so many people are afraid to admit they like a film like this, or they toss it off as just, oh, whatever. When you look at it, you get this kind of window into that time and seeing what people are doing. I mean, it is definitely a product of its time. I mean,
Right. I agree. I agree. But you know, they approached it with a great deal of integrity, and I think that comes through in a weird sort of way. Absolutely a strange movie, but it's also, it has some complexity and some depth, and there's a
Mhm.
message and all that other stuff, and some really good actors and some
Yeah.
really good music. So it is quirky and it's odd, but it's also entertaining at the same time. There's probably more integrity in that film than there is in a lot of films nowadays,
Hmm.
that are just being like cranked out to make as much money as they possibly can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Now, you had another movie. I hope you don't mind me asking. You had another movie come
I'm
out
not sure yet.
1980, called Powderheads.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
I actually,
That was a weird reaction. I smashed my knee into my desk.
I
Yes.
thought you were kicking the camera saying, okay, no, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just cut it off.
You
Uh,
know what? I give up on trying to edit what it is I talk about, what I don't talk about.
but Powderheads, I actually caught on YouTube. That was another. When did that get filmed? Was that before or after the Apple?
That was
You're,
right after the Apple.
it
So I
was.
finished shooting the Apple and I flew home to Edmonton for Christmas.
Hmm.
And a good friend of mine to this day was a casting director there, Betty Chadwick. And she was casting this movie in Edmonton. And I knew her when I was a dancer there. And we had mutual friends and we sort of hung out with, mutual friends.
Hmm.
And she was casting this thing and she knew that I'd just done the Apple. And so she, I guess, recommended me or whatever. This was the second movie I'd ever done, Powderheads. And yeah, it was offered to me. I just kind of went in
Sure.
and did it. And it was fun. It was probably not as much fun as the Apple, because we were also shooting in the middle of winter in Edmonton, and that
Right.
was cold. And it was sort of a silly movie. It was just
Mm.
sort of silly. But what the heck? I got to ski, and I got to
Sure.
ski in some really great ski equipment in between shooting and during shooting too. Most of this, well, at that time again, um, these ski movies were really popular. Like
Right.
literally, I forget the name of the gentleman who did tons and tons of ski movies. They weren't narratives; they were just movies with people doing incredible skiing.
Right.
And so this movie, Powderheads, was trying to combine that trend and make it into a comedy narrative. Um, so there was a lot of film of people skiing in these
Yes.
incredible areas. I mean, where I grew up, we're very close to the Rockies, and it's some of the best skiing in the world. So they did a bunch of that. I mean, one part of the movie is where we enter this ski race,
Yeah.
and so they do all this, shooting with real
Skiers, yeah.
skiers. Yeah, stunt people or real skiers. Yeah. So yeah, they were trying to kind of, combine the two things. It was sort of like
Right.
a hybrid of it's very popular movies for ski enthusiasts with a comedy narrative, which I think had limited success in terms of how well it
Sure.
worked. What the heck?
I just was interested to go. I was wondering when you shot it, because you go from the very large production like the Apple
Yeah.
to Powderheads, which felt a little bit more, and not in a bad way, just different. That as far as budget and scope wise, it is a little
Right.
bit smaller. So I just found that
Yes.
interesting. And then you would go on to do Days of Our Lives, right? Soon after that as well.
So yes, after I went back to London for a while and eventually made my way to Los Angeles. Um, and but it was probably at least a year
Hmm.
after the Apple was released. And I, based on the Apple, based on the fact that I was this lead in the movie, I got an agent fairly quickly, and they started submitting me in Los Angeles for all sorts of stuff. And I did a couple of episodic things. I did Knight Rider and something else,
Hmm.
and then I landed Days of Our Lives, the first Kayla Brady.
Nice.
Kayla
And
Brady ended up being, she's still on. I'm like,
yeah.
hey, what about me? You want me back? But, it's interesting because recently on Facebook, people have been talking about Days of Our Lives and how, when I left after 2 years, the person who replaced me played the character so very differently from how I had played her, which is fine. I mean, she's had some incredible longevity, that's for sure. Yeah. So yes, that was sort of the big thing
Hmm.
for me. As a matter of fact, talk about not having money. I drove to the studio, the NBC studio in the Valley. I didn't have that far to go. I think I was living in the Valley anyway, in Studio City. And before I could turn into the studio parking lot, I ran out of gas.
Oh.
So I had to park on the street. I ran in for my first day, and I had to borrow some money
Sure.
to get some gas to fill up my tank. Oh, boo-hoo, right? But yeah, I really needed the job, I guess is the point.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden I had this regular paycheck coming in, and for me, it was quite a bit of money. And I remember the first thing I bought were these, which I still have, are this pair of jade earrings that were like $75. And I thought, wow, should I? And I did it. And, even to this day, I'm not going to buy $75 earrings. I just buy fake stuff.
Sure.
That was my big first
Mhm.
expenditure when I got Days of Our Lives.
Speaking of wardrobe, did you get a chance to take anything from the Apple from any of that wardrobe?
I did, but I I don't have it anymore. I
Sure,
don't
sure.
remember when it was I gave it away, but I
Mhm.
did keep some things. Yes. But there was never any place to wear them. So
Sure.
it's like eventually it was like, why are these still in my closet? I kind of wish I had them still, but it's fine.
See,
One time at a convention, this young woman came up to me dressed completely as BB in
yeah.
Speed with this
Wow.
reflecting
Mhm.
fabric. I mean, it was incredible. It was like the greatest thing ever. I couldn't believe it.
That's awesome. Yeah, cosplayers really go all out in making them authentic. It's really wild, the detail they put into it.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, the Apple and that kind of helped launch you, and here we are today.
Here we are
You're
today.
still still doing films and projects, which is great. You did a Rock and Roll Christmas last year, was it called, I think, or
Yeah, it was last year I shot it. It aired actually in Canada this year.
Mhm.
But yeah, I shot it last year. That was really fun because, again, I got to sing. I played a
Right.
singer. It's a sort of mother-daughter story. about, redemption and all that other stuff at Christmas, of course. What else? But one of the reasons I wanted to do that was because I got to sing and we recorded
Right.
a soundtrack and all that other stuff. And this time it was me.
I was gonna ask, was it you
Mm,
this time?
yes, I've done a couple of things since the
Mhm.
Apple where I actually got to sing. So that's good.
That's good.
Check off that little bucket list. Um, yeah, so that was super fun. Yeah, and with this, of course, with the pandemic, it's kind
Mhm.
of put a stop to most things. But there, everything is done remotely now. I
Mhm.
mean, auditioning, everything. But what I have been sort of filling my time with is I have a script that I wrote with someone, and I have a producer and it got optioned by a
Oh,
production
nice.
company up in Canada. So we've been just kind of, digging into that, and we're sort of doing a rewrite right now. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm very excited. I have another script that I've discovered that I really enjoy writing. So there was this other script that I have is something I've been sort of writing since I was about 12.
Wow.
And finally, I want to say about 6 years ago, I wrote a full script,
Mhm.
which was the first script I ever wrote. So you can imagine how many rewrites I've had to do with that one. But and also I want to I've directed a short film that I
Right.
also wrote, um, but I want to get into directing. So this script that I wrote with my co-writer is a vehicle for me to direct also.
Awesome. I was gonna ask if
So
you were gonna
yeah,
direct it as well. Hopefully,
yeah.
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 That's
So that's very I really am excited about that prospect. So we'll see how that all unfolds.
great. And
Yeah,
people can follow you on Facebook, keep up to date with your stuff, or
absolutely. Catherine Mary Stewart on Facebook. I'm Catherine Mary Stewart on Instagram. I'm at cms.all on Twitter. But if you do hashtag Catherine Mary Stewart, I think that shows up. Um, yes. And I do have a website that I'm actually rebuilding right now,
Mhm.
but you can email me if you like that at info@catherinemarystewart.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, so and I love talking to everybody. I really do. I appreciate any fans that might be out there, and I really do. It's
Well,
fun for me.
I mean, it's you got a great body of work and a lot of films of yours I've watched over the years, so this is always a pleasure. And I
Yeah.
think just the last question, you were in a musical. Do you have a favorite musical?
Do I have a favorite musical? Oh boy. Probably, oh, I know what it is, of course. I was going to say Sound of Music, but no, it's Jesus Christ Superstar.
It's
That is my era. When I saw that, I was a teenager, and just the dancing and the music, and I love it to this day. I love it. It blew me away, and I am passionate about Jesus Christ Superstar.
that's awesome. That's a great pick. I have a secret love for musicals as well, not so secret actually. But
What's your
that's a
favorite?
see, yeah, I knew you were going to ask that.
You wanted to
Uh,
gloss over that, didn't you? You're not going to get away with
I was going to
it.
try to escape it, but in recent, I would say probably one of my favorites. It's hard. I'm horrible with this with lists too. I
Mhm.
can never usually pick just one, but
Right.
for modern musicals, I would say Moulin Rouge and The Greatest Showman are two of my like favorite in the last 20 years
Oh
musicals
boy. I
for
mean, well,
sure.
those are so incredible. I mean, both of those in different ways, but yeah,
Mhm.
they're really pieces of art, those two.
And one of my favorites for it's a seasonal thing, but it's White Christmas with Bing
Oh,
Crosby
because
and Denny. Yeah, I that's in music I listen to every year during Christmas. It's like the epitome for me for Christmas. There's a reason why that album still gets played by everybody today for Christmas. It's
Oh,
like,
for sure.
just one of those moments. And I think people forget that it was also a musical. You got the
Yeah.
album, but
Yeah. Yeah.
there's just
Yeah.
all those classical musicals though are just they get you. You're like, wow, the talent in those musicals, and the Apple, I think it's a bad rep. People talk about how religious it is or whatnot, but you mentioned Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I'm like, if you look especially in that era, a lot of musicals have religious base or based off of religious stories, because
Hmm.
I think they just kind of lend themselves to it, especially when, depending on which religion you follow, revivals and some song and story go together so much in the way people worship, that I think it's just natural.
Yeah, it's
It's,
natural, and they're wonderful stories. I
mhm.
mean, they're incredible narratives that you can put music to and have something really solid there. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, probably you could probably peg most stories to the Bible, or the whatever you believe in. Because it's this, the hero, the villain, the good, all this
It,
stuff that you read in the Bible, or whatever you follow, the Torah or whatever, or the Quran or whatever. They're very similar stories.
mhm.
Very, you start seeing things very much in common, and that you could probably, explain in many, many narratives that we see on the screen today.
Absolutely. Well, always a pleasure, Catherine. Thank you so much.
Yes, you too.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday with your puzzle.
I know. Got back into puzzles. We've done so many puzzles this year.
I think everybody has done a lot of puzzles this year.
I got like 6 for Christmas, and I'm like,
Nice.
no.
You're like, I
Like this
just got done
horrible
with my
addiction.
collection.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So anyway, we decided to whip it out. But I think things are going to start picking up again tomorrow. The holidays are all over now in the
Yeah.
business. So
And,
um,
and now you got that period of time between, like, no breaks whatsoever between now and Easter, where there's no days off for anyone.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So yeah, it's good though. All
Fantastic.
good.
Well, thank you again. And yeah, I hope you have a pleasant day.
Yeah, you too. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark.
You bet.